All right, greetings everybody. Today we wanted to get on and talk about a few things. I've been on some discussions on some chats and stuff, and kind of go through some debates. And it seems like people are kind of hung up on a few things, which I'm going to try and explain in this video. And I'm going to kind of follow on. All of these videos that I'm doing are kind of in sequence. So I'm going to pick up on sort of that last video I did where I'm looking at sort of the geometry of the angle of inclination, I think, that's creating the sun. But I'm also doing some studying. So I'm studying a couple books here by L. Michael Morales. I'd recommend these to everybody. Who shall ascend the mountain of the Lord, on the book of Leviticus. So trying to understand the Levitical laws. And then he's also got a commentary on the book of Numbers, which these are very beneficial. He's not taking the same approach I am with the numbers, but at the same time, it's going to help with the concept of the sort of chiastic structures and sort of what I think is happening with the 7 days of creation there. But before we get into this, I guess I just wanted to touch on, I got this right here, this rug I picked this up in Kabul, Afghanistan, and at a bazaar there. And we got this obsession with perfection, and people tend to worship. So worship is putting something at the top of something and making that most important. But if we think about the idea of perfection, like a rug, like a machine-made rug versus a hand-tied rug. So this is a hand-tied rug that took the effort. You have this pattern that you're going to tie it to, but you're going to be using, depending on the material. So you could use synthetic materials, synthetically dyed, that have a perfect, consistent size and color, or you could use hand-spun wool like this that's dyed. And then so you get this sort of abrash. So you get this imperfection, this abrash that happens within the pattern of the rug. Which you can kind of see better on the back side there. But you'll see where you get some of the yarn there, the strands, when they were tying it, in inconsistent colors, and it gets this abrash color. And the way it's tied, you get a little bit of variation in the, it's not perfectly straight. And so there's all these things that you would say are imperfect about it. And so it would get rejected as being perfect. But, this rug right here, would be, it's far more beautiful than something that's just made by a machine, with synthetic fibers. Is going to be perfect to the sort of idea you have in your head, but there's all these other aspects to it. So, I just wanted to point that out as far as, the way people want to see and apply their cosmology. So they're going to want to do that also with this globe model right here. So this is something that's highly practical. So this is something that, like a machine-made rug, you could spit something like that out, and maybe it could be made in a matter of minutes. This is going to take months to hand tie this rug and all the effort that goes into it. So when we think about creation, like this globe model is going to be very beneficial to us because, like I said, what you're doing is you're going to project all of the features, and you're going to map out all of your latitudes and longitudes that are going to be set over time. So the first thing you're going to do is figure out the mean distance of the sun between your tropics to start to establish latitude. And then once you get latitude, you'll get your equation for time, which is going to be the mean amount of time. You're going to set your 24-hour day to this mean amount of time, but for your sun. And then once you have your mean amount of time, then you can start to set longitude. You're going to synchronize all your clocks, and you're going to go off of one point, one prime meridian, and then you're going to set your clocks. And you're going to plot all your points out on your map, your cartograph, and then you're going to put it on a projection, which in this is a globe model. So we see that longitudes run straight, latitudes run parallel to each other, and those are exactly perpendicular. So we see that the distance between longitudes compresses as you get to either pole, and this is a very beneficial, practical projection of what's happening. However, is it truth? Is this bear witness to the creation of everything. And now we know that there's problems with this. If you're going to make everything physical and put a physical limit out there that you're never going to reach, you know, it's going to simplify things, but then you have to put this in motion for it all to make sense. You got to spin it, and then move it around another object, which we know is not happening, right? As much as people want to make this truth and the true witness to God's creation, there's problems with that. You're going to get homogeneous views of the universe and isotropic views of the universe, and then you've got distances to these objects have to be so astronomical it just gets obscene. So we know that this is planar. So we're understanding this is planar. You know, the ancients still saw this as spherical as they're trying to understand the heavens. Like studying Ptolemy, he's thinking that the earth is spherical still, and they're tracking everything off of the sun. And so he's seeing that the sun there's this index of the sun, this ecliptic index, and so that was the basis for his model. So a lot of his math, while it's helpful in some ways, there's stuff that I can't use in the study of him because he's basing everything off of this idea of a geocentric spherical Earth model. So we're looking at a planar Earth model. And so how does that work? Well, first of all, your radius of this sphere right here is going to be shorter than your circumference. So 1/4 of the circumference here, we're going to call that 6,225 miles to make the entire circumference 24,900 miles. But the radius here of a sphere is going to be 3,965 miles. 3,965 miles would be our radius approximately. And I use these numbers because we see these kind of numbers show up in our biblical numbers, like 3,965 is a very important number. If you're following everything that I'm finding in the book of Numbers, you'll see why I'm using that number instead of 3,960 as some people will have it. So at any rate, so what do you do with that distance? So remember that your longitude and latitude, all this is being tracked off of the position of the luminaries. So you're looking at the luminaries based off of your ground position, and you're trying to figure out, you're applying this, so your projection of your map, this globe projection, is based off of those longitude and latitude. Now, the longitude we know does not run directly. You cannot shoot an azimuth straight and dead reckon yourself straight from the equator to the pole and walk a straight line, as this globe would tell you that you can do. We know that that's not happening. We know that instead of going straight, you're making a big arc. You're going to have to move in a big arc on your line of longitude to rectify that. And so that distance, you know, how do we figure that distance? Because the equator right here is going to be the same in your planar model. So your planar model is going to be sort of like we see in the astrolabe here. So I've got several other videos where talking about this a little bit, but in the astrolabe video, you see this would be more of a polar projection that you're going to see in a sort of a planar Earth projection. And so from the center, you see what happens is you compress these latitudes. And then these other videos, we saw that the ratio of these as you're going from outside to in are going to be at a ratio of 5:1, right? Outside to inside. But the important thing that we got from this astrolabe tool is that even though it compresses the latitudes inward, this is projected from a 0-degree latitude position. But you see that these pointers always point to the same stars in the night sky as this is turning. And the center of this rotation is always right there. And the latitude that takes place is 42.5 degrees. And you'll see that last video, I asked the question are they pinned together at 42.5 degrees? So, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you'll see that all of the luminaries are basically off of this big ring right here on this projection with the basically we're manipulating latitudes to make this ring work And now we're going to see that all of these luminaries basically pivot around this central point. So what is the importance of that 42.5 degree point? Well, that's going to be the subject of what we're going to want to do here with some of this findings from that last video. So now that last video was do the hands of the Lord cross at 42 degrees. So 42.5 is actually, and you know, I'll touch on this in previous videos. If anybody, you know, looks at any of my work here, you should probably go back and look at these base 2 videos right here of magnetism and musical notation and the cart and the Lord. Basically the sort of understanding how this cross, the Lord, is formed, and that's what these first 3 videos are talking about here. But then I have a video on the golden angle as well, and sort of how we see the golden angle in all of creation. Well, that golden angle is going to be this 137.5 degree piece right here, which is 360 divided by 5 squared. And so if we look at our planar projection, we're going to project up that 137.5 degree piece, and we're going to have a 42.5 degree segment here with a 47.5 degree segment here. And so again, 42.5 degree north is where that rotation point is looking at it's showing on the astrolabe. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, so just go back and review on this video about the sort of how these understanding the light. So we got to understand the light from the beginning. Again, I had this I use this sort of tool of showing the sort of the stator, which would be the Earth, and how it drives the rotor, which would be sort of the void plane, the atom, and how Eve is driving Adam. Strong man driving the race and the bridegroom, and how you're getting these sort of chambers right here, these sort of quadrants. But it starts with understanding this. Again, magnetism, we can think of it as a north to south pole. We've got a pole magnet right here that would be circular, just for effect here. But we think of this, the separation of the 2 sides of the magnet is, you know, you have a collapsing in with, you know, a dielectric, and then that has an equal and opposite reaction, which would be sort of this levity that's sort of that's pushing out the lighter element, right? So we think of the flux as pushing out and drawing in simultaneously. And so we could think of this flux as, if we're just going to look at it going one way, which anything going one way will have an equal and opposite going the other way, but we're going to think of this again coming off the edge, hitting its break point, and then coming back into the center of the other side. From a top-down view, we would see it coming off the edge, making its rotation around, this time in 5 turns, and then going back in 3 turns to the center on the other side, because we understand that the ratio of this is 5:1, side to side of this. And, you know, we see this in musical notation. So from the central pole rotating out, we know that we're going from pole to pole here, top to bottom. But sort of a top-down view is you'd see it get all the way to its break point, at which it's going to start wrapping back in on itself and sort of making a cardioid shape. And again, I would point everybody to Ken Wheeler's work to understand this. Again, our treble clef, again, the same thing. It's coming up through the material off the edge. So this would be sort of understanding this treble clef movement right here from the side, or the bass clef, I mean, from the side, which would be your treble clef. But yeah, coming up through the matter, coming off the edge, wrapping all the way back around, and then back up into the center. So we're looking at trying to understand the flow of this flux, and understanding there's a positive and negative side, a north to south, a hot to cold, and then sort of inside to outside, we would be understanding this shape right here, which would be sort of, you're taking this shape right here and you're just sort of rotating it out. So you're going to understand that you're going to have more of a dead space in the center, because you're going to wrap from pole to the pole. Okay, so this is going to be sort of the inside out that you're going to see going from pole to pole. and to help you understand the movement, the flux, the movement of this. Again, here, when we apply these, we're talking Adam and Eve, so you got to pin those two hands together. So Eve is going to be the earth. That's the eretz. It's the flow. It's where the matter is coming to a head. It's flowing to a head. And then, well, actually, it's the flow is what's driving the matter into a head like this. But it's also pushing the lighter elements out, right? The lighter matter. It's driving up and stratifying your layers here, like you're doing over here. And then your Adam plane here is going to be the sort of the rotor. You think of this, the spirit, the rotor driving the waters, sort of turning, rotating like a hinge as it's going around. And so that's the void plane. So day one is going to be the void. Again, the day two is the earth, which is literally Eve. Hava it's telling you it's a fence and it's a window, those two things together. So this fence and a window right here, this would be your planar earth, and with the void. And so the planar earth would be driving the void like a rotor. But this void plane, and when we think of this idea of gravity right here, gravity would be the thing on the physical plane, which would be driving the earth into this plane, but it's in driving the lighter elements up to create your stratified atmosphere. But we're also thinking of how this applies to the metaphysical. So how it applies to the void at the beginning of creation. So you have gravity pinching the void together and stretching it out like a hand to separate day from night, positive to negative. And then that is Adam, and that's pinned to Eve, which is the material plane, this is the plane, and then the pole is here. So when you put these two together and pin them together, you're going to end up with a sort of this thing right here, right? Which is this torus shape. And I would recommend everybody over to Tomb of Illumination to see his kind of stuff. But what you're doing is you're just creating once these are pinned, you got to understand that the physical and the void you can't separate them. So you're sort of wrapping this back over to the end of the earth here. So when you think about this flux coming out, and you're told that it's 7 days of flux as it comes out. So it's going to come out, and it's 7 days of this coming out. So 7 days of flux this way. I had a video where I was tracing an apple to kind of understand this. But so we think of the void as drawing in the void and pushing out the energy. And so you're getting a pulsing, 7 days of pulsing here where it's coming out. And it's on that fourth day, halfway through the fourth day, that 3.5 point right there, right, is where you should be, your midpoint. And that's going to be meeting with the pulsing of this vertical plane right here, which is going to be doing the same thing, right? It's going to be going across this deal 7 days from coming off the edge until it goes down the drain of the void. So, because these are pinned together. So the void, you could think, coming out of the void, you've got 7 days turning like this, and then the halfway point is right here on the fourth day. And then it goes down, essentially goes down the drain, you could think of it, and then comes out on the underside for probably, I'm thinking it must be the 3 days like you're told. So 3 days and then rises again, right? So in the story of Christ, the resurrection of Christ, you're to understand this aspect of 3 days and then coming back up out. Descended in hell for 3 days and then rose again. So it's this sort of flow. So we're thinking of the pulse from each of these. So we're thinking of 7 days of pulse here, and then 7 days of pulse off of this, and the bridegroom in the chamber would be the meeting where those two things are coming together, and of course it's happening at the apex, which is going to be, when we think of all of the flux of all of this stuff, you're going to have all of your material driven up, and that's why I'm saying it's hydrogen and helium at the top. If you're going to look at, there's another Tomb of Illumination. If you look at his work, he's got some other ideas of what's happening in the void space here, I guess in the planar, but he's got a pretty good concept, I think, on what's happening at the tropical regions with this pressure differential, because all of your moisture is getting drawn into this tropical region right here, sort of this it's like a deader space, and then you get the shredding because the sun is there, and it's shredding and causing this the change of water. Water is unstable, so when we talk about Reuben is sea level because water is always trying to evaporate and it's trying to condense. It's constantly trying to do both of these things, and so we have this set level, which is sea level, and so Reuben's associated with that. But there's all of this hydrogen, pure hydrogen, that has to get up. It has to get sort of levigated, right? It's got to get ground up. It's got to get shredded to the point that it can get up and above that helium layer. So you have this pure helium layer, and of course then you got the welder's flash thing happening right up there. And so yeah, you got a void space in the center. This starts to kind of resemble sort of a shape like a fruit, because again, and the fruit there is an apple, but it's more like an apricot. They had apricots, not apples, in the biblical text. So if you're going to look at a fruit to compare this to, it'd be like an apricot, I guess. But yeah, so the flux 7 days out from both of these planes merging together. So it should be like 7 to 4. Your Lucas numbers would tell you this is a 4, and then 7 to 4, and then it would be 4 to 3, 4 to 3. So this other chamber would be sort of a 3. This would be a 7. And then you'd have two neutral chambers here that are 4s that are probably got something to do. Well, this has definitely got to do with your clear night sky, how you can see all of the stars. Now the stars are going to be closer to whatever the merge point, the rotation point, and they're going to be evenly turning, and they're not going to be subject to that sort of thing that we saw in the astrolabe with the ring. So they're going to be sort of trapped, whatever gases or whatever that are trapped there that are illuminating that you're seeing, and then you're seeing them in a particular layer. But it's definitely got to do with this neutral plane of how you're seeing them, and then this is going to have more to do with the moon, and this with the sun. And I think I don't know how the other planets fit in. Obviously Venus must have something to do with being opposite of the sun somehow, and then the volume of the moon here you must be seeing up. But it's again, you're trying to fathom what's going on with the again, you've got a pole here. The physical is telling you there's a pole, and then your cut line is going to be your right. When you're looking at this concept from the pole to your cut line, this is happening on the physical, but on the metaphysical, this is the pole and the cut line is here. So the cut line probably is at the edge. Again, we've got a 137.5 degree incline, and that leaves you 47.5 and 42.5 imbalance. But that middle point really should be trying to be the 45. So you're left with a 2.5 degree gap. And of course the moon, when we think of the moon, it's 5 degrees off. So the 5 degree offset that's happening with the moon has likely got to do with the cut line for your the cut line and the pole being indexed off of each other by that 2.5 degrees, which is going to give you this sort of this other point. And then that other video, I don't think I made that real clear, but again, I'm using biblical numbers to put you from 2330, right? Because it's telling us that 151, 450 is going to be our 90 degree segment to the equator. And then our what we find from Judah south is going to be that 39, 650 portion in the first census is going to give us our 23.5 degree radius for the this basically the movement of the sun, to understand the circle that the sun is making. And that reduces down, both of those reduce down by 65 to 2330 and 610. That helps us because we're dealing with Fibonacci numbers. So the 13th Fibonacci number to the 15th Fibonacci number by a factor of 10 here. And so we can see that there's a phi element, which is, it's important because we're dealing with phi to 1 from either side of this. Just like these, the 7 and 4, these are Lucas numbers. So Lucas numbers, we're dealing with, you know, from 3 to 7 would be like day 1 to day 2, day 3 to day 4, 18 to 47. So these are going to be the powers of the golden mean by the index number here. So phi to the first power to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. And again, we're dealing with a chiastic sort of structure. So we're going to get to the apex and then return back down, I think. And I think that's why we have this 47-degree range for the ecliptical range. So the 47-degree ecliptical range, it's really, I think, 18 degrees is what I did on that last video. So you have an 18-degree even distribution. And we see that because the analemma, when we look at the analemma here, and we break this into 23.5 degrees on either side, we know that 23.5 degrees is equal to phi squared times 9 on either side, right? And yeah, I mean, I've talked about this at length, but anyway, there's that 9 factor of 9 on either side. It would be like 18 times phi squared to get to your 47.5. So it's sort of telling us, I think, to do this 18 degrees. And of course, that puts us at the dimensions again. We're 2330 for this 90-degree piece. That puts us at 2250 to this area right here, which was our crossing. So where these two circles meet right here, this Pisces is 2250, which gives us 80. It's 80. This little segment right here is 80 to 2250 all the way here to the center. Now this segment right here, this 42.5 degrees north, relative to our 2330 here, this is going to be, ends up being 1100, I do believe. And then that leaves this other segment, this 47.5 is 1, 2, 3. So it's 1230, which again, this is our Lucas number right here, 1230 to 1100. And then this 1100 breaks down to 1020 when we take the 80 off of it. So 1020. Well, why is that important? Well, when we look at this, when we take and find if we take 47.5 on our calculator and we find the sine value for that, so we're going off of the length of the hypotenuse right here, which when I plug this geometry into a sort of a affinity, it was an affinity, and basically I set my geometry like this. I had a circle that was 2330, I had a circle with a radius of 610, and I joined these together, and then what I did was I took a line and then I indexed it 9 degrees on either side, brought them down to a point, and then this I merged these 3 lines together to find out how I could align the lines so that they hit right on the solstices with that center angle coming to a point, and where the center point would point. And of course, this 18-degree segment, the center point points right to the crossing right here. This Pisces point with the edges touching here, and then that length gave me 2770. So that came out right even to 2770, which was interesting because we're going to see these numbers I'll show you where we see these numbers in a second, but 2770, but that leaves us not quite all the way to the center. So we come up short by 210 to the center, and so we have a segment of 80, and then that leaves us right here with 2040, a segment of 2040, and then the height of this was 1872. And this is a little bit off. This came out to like 1871, and this to 2042. But I'm thinking that because 1872 is equal to 144 times 13, which is, right, our 12th Fibonacci number. So we know that 233 times 13 is 3029. And we know that 3029, our initial 151, 450 value that we reduced by a factor of 65, we know that this number times 2 is 302, 900, right? Which is going to be half of the 605, 800, right? So half of 605, 800. So essentially our diameter for this piece right here was going to be relative to 302, 900. So it's interesting that this number shows up by a factor of 5. So if we divide this by the golden mean, we're going to get 1872 as our height right here. Well, then now we've got this other piece. We've got this other segment right here that's not showing up. So if we find this triangle that is 210 here to some other value here, and then some other height value here, and then we plug this, and then now we're going to use our tangent function for 47 in the same degree ratio, and we apply this, we're going to find that this ends up being 259, which I wanted to adjust this to 260 because 26 is all over the map on stuff, but it's 259. And then this segment right here ended up being 153. So 153 shows up again right here. But again, if we add 2770 to 259 for this other segment right here from the center, you're going to get 3029. 3029, and then when you add this factor, I forget what we get, 1873 plus 153, or 1872 plus 153, I mean. I forget what you get there, but that was significant too. So it was 5, 25, 1, 13, 4, 24, 15. No, I did something wrong there. Anyway, doesn't matter. So anyway, we do hit on that 3029 figure again on the length for this other little missing triangle piece right down here. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but okay, so then it was like, okay, well, where do we see some of these figures? Because some of these seem like I've seen them before. So I was just going through the census 1 and census 2 figures again. And again, anybody that thinks that these numbers are random, you know, again, this Levi figure is something that we find. This 2250 again is going to be, that was the value that we got for our middle segment right here, right? To the crossing. So 2250 there. Oh yeah, that's right. This was significant. I'm sorry. Because this ended up being 2025. So 153 plus 1872 was 2025. And I'll show you why that's significant, because 2025 times 2 equals 4050, right? So 4050 is kind of interesting, this height, because when we look at these, again, these figures, you know, the first census, the one that stuck out was Gad's number of 50 to get us started, to seeing that this group right here, this group of man, this 151,450 was the 1/4 part of Israel. That found us 2250 for Levi, this missing number, and then that comes to 4070, and we find the reference to the eclipse and everything with that. Won't get back into that, but it's in the old videos there. But yeah, so 151,450, again, that 4050 number, right? We know that Ephraim's number is 4050 in the first census. It becomes Gad's number in the second census. And when we looked at the average of these numbers, we saw that Benjamin's figure right here, which is 354, this is a moon pattern, right? If you add these two together and find the average, it's going to be 40,500. Manasseh again has this Lucas number right here, 322, and then Dan right here is 322 times 2. You're going to see that this is a multiple. If you add Manasseh and Dan together in this census, you're going to get 94,900, which is going to be the same as adding Asher and Naphtali, 94,900. And there's one other one too that adds up. I think it's Issachar. Yeah, it's Issachar and Ephraim. You add those two together, and they're 94,900 as well. So very interesting, and you're going to find that there's a bunch of interesting stuff like that with this census. When you start adding up doubles and triples of these figures and the number of hits that you're going to get. But at any rate, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so this was our unique number for this census. The second census right here, the only one that doesn't end in 50, is going to be Reuben's number. So Reuben's number, the difference there is 2770. And again, this is our length right here that we find when we did our model. This came out to 2770, this length right here. So that seems significant. Then again, our 2025 number to 4050, when we doubled it. So again, if we take 4050 and we divide 4050 by, if we divide that by 3029, we're going to get this value of 1.33707, whatever this number is. Well, this is the same as if we took Levi's 2250, divided it by 605,800, and multiplied it by 360. You're going to get this same value right here. So 4050 divided by 3029 is the same as this value. So that's interesting to find, 2770. Our other figure right here was going to be this 1020, which is interesting because, again, the middle point, this 42,500, is going to be this 1100 number. That's the middle point. But again, that's the middle point of this 47.5. But that 42.5 was the center of the turning on our astrolabe. So 42,500 is like, or the 42.5 degrees, you know, when we plot it out on this line right here, it's bisecting. It's the middle point of this 47.5 degree triangle right here. So, you know, how that ties in, I don't know, but 1020 is a number that we find for Benjamin. So again, Benjamin, this is actually his step change, his individual step change between positions. Again, remember this send 1 to send 2, this is position 11, and this is position 21 that we found when we did the blessings and curses. So there's 10 steps in between. So his step change is actually 1020. That's his exact step change for Benjamin. And remember that Benjamin's average is going to be 40,500. The average for Ephraim right here again was 36,500, right? So a sun pattern for Ephraim, a moon pattern for Benjamin. Very interesting that these numbers just, they show up, they pop up. This 10, if you took the change for Dan and subtracted, looked at the difference between the change for Asher right here, you're going to see that we can find 10,200 again there. So just thought that was interesting that these numbers had popped up. Seems like there's more to draw out from there, but again, this is just, these are things that I'm finding when I'm applying this to the actual geometry, the movements of the sun again, and I'm applying this trigonometry here to find some of these values. You know, when we start setting the values that they're giving in the Bible for these, you know, and it all starts from this 1/4 part of Israel to set this 90-degree piece to 151,450 in this first census, and a bunch of this stuff starts popping out. So anyway, just wanted to share that. Hopefully that clears up some of the understanding of what I was trying to explain with this and some of these other videos. But, you know, if I'm losing anybody in any of this stuff, I'm trying to synthesize all of this together and put it into some polished form. But really, I first got to figure out like what's effective in trying to explain this to people, and where am I losing stuff. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated. But hope you're enjoying that, and we'll see you on the next one.